This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders that are designing our future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and there's a lot of industries in this world that we take for granted. One of them is transportation. It's sort of like the offensive lineman in football. You don't really know anyone's name until they give up a sack. That's how transportation is. Until there's a pothole holding up traffic for a couple hours, you don't even think about it. But it's a big, complicated world with a lot of layers. But there's one person I know who has really found a way to master the inner workings of the transportation industry, and her name is Esther Franklin. She's the author of the new book, Bridging the Gap, Breaking Barriers and Building Pathways to Transportation Careers. We're going to talk about how she found herself in this industry, what inspired her to start her own company, and discuss the lasting impact of the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill that was signed in 2021. Esther Franklin, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Esther, it's been a long journey for you. So for folks who haven't listened to past podcasts, we last spoke in February of 2022. We are now in March of 2025. And when we first spoke, you were telling me about this amazing idea of a book that you were working on. And I guess, boy, it ain't quick, Esther, to write a book. So tell me about the last 3 years. And finally, congratulations, the book is ready and out in the world. Tell me how the last few years have been.
Yeah, it's been a long journey with all the projects that we were working on and the new bills coming out, the grants. So it was so much on my plate. It was a balancing act. So I'm like, okay, I got a lot certain times to this. I still have to work on my projects. I'm a project manager too, and also the CEO of the company. So it was really like a balancing act for me. And I just said, and I think it was in December of 2023. I said, you know what? I got to get that. I got to get this done. So I put my head to the grindstone, let everything else on the side, and I focused and got it done. We have really had a lot done, but I dropped the ball because, of course, the business has to it needed me. So I had to do a lot of things. I'm like, all right, but do a lot of business development. I pulled up a new team. We have a lot of new people on board with all the work that we had. So we're good. So now I'm just like, now we're finally at this milestone. I'm excited. And I'm just hopefully people can read it and get some insight on what we're trying to do, what's out there in terms of careers and stuff. So we need human capital.
That's awesome. Good stuff. Yeah, it's funny, Esther, because I think, as you know, our company, Advantage Forbes Books, the Authority Company, what we do is we make life easier for entrepreneurs like yourself who want to write a book. But even then, it's still up to you. I mean, we offer varying services in editing and writing, but at the end of the day, it's got to come from you because people want to know about your subject matter expertise. So for folks not familiar with Esther Franklin, I know the one thing that always comes up is infrastructure. And I know the last time we spoke, there was talk of this infrastructure bill that was going to be introduced, and it actually did happen. What's the last few years been like in your world of it finally happening? Because, Esther, I think both of you and I are old enough to remember that at every presidential cycle, every president always talks about infrastructure and does nothing about it. Finally, say what you will. Whatever party lines you are aligned with, say what you will, Joe Biden is one of the few presidents who actually did something with infrastructure. So tell me, you've already laid out that it's been a busy few years trying to work this book in, but tell me how things are in this infrastructure world right now.
Actually, big ups to Biden. He actually, implemented the program, and he had a lot to do on his plate too. So with that, there's a lot of grant programs that come through, with the local municipalities, different Department of Transportation. They have to get the money, siphon it through the pipeline. And then not only with that, but then you have to get the acquisition process. So the acquisition process, you have to get your consultants in there and trying to, come together collaboratively to get the project done. Now the money's there. Everyone's working together. It's just like, okay, I'm on this team. Have to get your team together so that you actually can work on project in different regions. So that's where the issue that I wouldn't call it an issue. It's a good issue. As far as human capital, then I've been working with the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation also, and they're trying to work in tandem with different consultants because they're having a human capital issue with all the money coming down the pipeline, knowing where to siphon the money at, who's out there, how long are these projects going to work? So we're developing a strategic plan on, hey, what could we do? We need to get to universities to get these human capitals, put down some of the entry to barriers. So we have to lower the playing field so that people can actually come and get in these positions, so that these bridges won't continue to collapse, or because we're in the city of Pittsburgh, we're the city of bridges, and Biden was here actually, I think it was in 2022, and the bridge collapsed. He was here, and it was bad, but it was the perfect opportune time to say, hey, we really need this money. So he initiated that, which I'm grateful for. But there's so many moving parts, so much going on, but the money's there. The human capital needs to come in. So that's what the book introduces. Hey, these are these careers. And everyone has this misconception like, oh, I have to get a college degree. I have to do that. Not all those positions require a college degree. There's some training. You can do some apprenticeship programs. And now they're lowering the playing field so that will allow more people to come in, lowering those barriers. So it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because you mentioned human capital, and it sounds like from, I was jokingly saying how like no one's ever done everything infrastructure, and now that this money's here, the humans aren't. That's what you talk about, the human capital. It's like for
Yes.
years you people in your industry and even like local officials are like, we need money to build these things, and then all of a sudden you have, it's always like, be careful what you ask for. It's like you finally have the money, but you don't have the actual people to do all of the things that this money allows you to do. So tell me what it's like. Just describe in terms of, you mentioned the fact that there's a lot of barriers to entry here. People maybe don't even know about these jobs, hence your book, Bridging the Gap. But what is it? What is it just been because the money wasn't there, so there weren't opportunities there, so then people weren't exploring it? Is it a chicken and the egg thing? Tell me about how that worked, like prior to all this funding and now where we are at now.
I think more or less, like from my experience in the industry, I don't think it's a matter of, oh, we're not going to get these people. I think it was more or less the good old boys, hey, we're going to pass it down to our generation. These are the people that's in the industry. It's a niche industry. Everyone doesn't know about it. So even when I talk about it, they're like, well, what is that? You see the people on the roadway, the construction people, they see it once it gets to that phase. However, on the back end, there's a whole nother process that needs to be done before you get to that phase. So is what the book talks about. But I think it's more or less like people staying in those positions because there's a minimal work, so we can handle this. We can handle this now, and you have appraisers in there. It's a niche market, it's eminent domain. So a lot of the appraisers do residential work or commercial, not in that eminent domain sector. So it's a specialized industry, and they don't specialize that in that realm. There's only a select few. So hey, if there's not a lot of work in that industry, hey, there's 7 of us, so we can do it. Okay, we can do it. Okay, we're gonna just put it around. We could, what I want to say, we can actually manage. That's the word I was looking. We can manage the workload. Now it's like, okay, can you manage it now? Now you have an influx. No, you can't manage it. So now it's taking longer for the project to get done because you have, hypothetically speaking, 7 specialized people in the appraisal sector that can do the work. You gotta wait, but you may have the right of way people. Hey, we got 32 projects on we could do it later. So it's later. Now all the money is there. Hey, we got all these projects here, there. Now we need more people. Do we have the people to train? So now you have to have a training aspect of it and then put them in there so the older people can move out. They need a succession plan so they can move out and move the new people in. But people like, well, what job? How do you do that? Or where's that job? Because more often than not, it was the attorneys doing the work, and now it's like it's an overload. But it doesn't require our work doesn't require a college degree. Some of them right away does it. You can get trained under certain people. Appraisal, you may need some college education. However, you can apprentice under a appraiser. So there's so many different facets. There's so many different levels that you can get. Title insurance. You don't need a college degree to do that. You can take courses to do that. So it's not a matter of, hey, I can go in with no experience. It takes a little bit of training, but not as much as experience that you think is required. And we need people to do that.
So it seems like one of the main jobs of the many is this appraiser position. And I guess the way you described it eloquently was the fact that for years, there were only X amount of jobs. So you only needed X amount of appraisers, and you mentioned the good old boys network. So it was I'm sure there was some nepotism involved. So when the father retired, the son came around. What describe those positions for us? Because for you, it's old hat. For Esther,
I
when you
know,
say
I
appraisers to me, I'm
know.
like, what are you talking about? So,
Right.
so tell me, because I know, again, there's probably a lot of these jobs, but you focus on appraisers a lot. So tell me what those roles entail.
So so in this sector that I'm in, like art, we need engineers. Like so we cover engineering. Of course, engineering, you have to have a college degree, but there's certain levels to architect. You could be a architectural engineer, you can be a civil engineer. There's so many different facets to the transportation engineer. Okay, so with that, that requires that. So our appraisers, there's appraisal right away and title is what primarily the area we focus in at Allrose. Appraisers, there's different facets to that too, but it's a generalized industry where say, okay, these are the generalized courses. However, this is a specific sector which is covered under the eminent domain code. So there's certain rules and regulations that appraisers has to follow in order to get that done in that sector. That makes sense?
Yeah. So what you're saying is there's no. Well, I guess there has been, but now they need more specific skills for appraisers. One appraiser can't do all of the different jobs that are entailed. Correct?
Right. You want a special so one appraiser, he may have an appraisal license, but he specializes in eminent domain work because he know what it entails. It may be, okay, there's a right-of-way manual or publication 378 that you have to follow to do that specific work. And if someone who specializes in residential or commercial appraiser may not know that sector, right? He just know his commercial property, residential. And when you say, hey, I need you to do a project for the eminent domain public transportation. Well, what does that entail? He can't go out there and say, hey, I'm just going to appraise this the same way I would appraise this property because it's a whole different.
Ballgame.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. So it's funny. So a dear friend of mine down in South Carolina works in your world, like highway constructions. When he describes it to me, it goes way over my head. He's like an engineer, but he describes how the projects that he's involved with are sort of piecemeal. So we've already discussed how complicated this is, but when finally money goes into these projects, then those projects are divvied up into certain people. So he was involved in an interstate project, but only like 10 miles of the interstate. Then another team is handling the other 10 miles. I mean, why is it so complicated? Is it just because, like, you've broken down, like, there's so much goes into just every little bit of it?
Yes, I think it's because it may be 10-mile roadway, you know, that one appraiser, see how he said, okay, someone else is doing that sector, someone else is doing this sector, because he probably can only handle that when his workload. You know, he may have some other things that he need to do, but they need to make sure that it's done properly. And then you do another it may take you 4 to 6 months to get it done too.
Wow.
You know, and then you have to reach certain milestones in order to get the project done so that project can go to the next stage in the process so they can get the roadway construction project done so that people can drive back and forth so that you can get your stuff from Amazon and you can get your stuff from the post office. So without that, it's just like, hey, I'm in traffic for an hour and a half. Atlanta is like terrible. Um Going back and forth. Even in Texas, I was in Texas a week ago and I was stuck in traffic from the airport DFW for about 2 hours. And I was just like, I picked the wrong time to come here. So that's another thing that goes into that, you know, people coming down, how many people are coming into the city, you know, how many jobs are out there. So they have to determine how much roadway, do they have to widen the roadway? Do they have to, you know, what things they need to do to accommodate for the influx of people coming into the city?
Hmm. So, well, Esther, after the last 12 minutes, we've made it abundantly clear what you do is a real pain. There's a lot going on. So let's go back to the beginning. Why would you put yourself through this, Esther? You seem very intelligent. You seem like you could do a lot of things. This is really hard, Esther, isn't it?
No, because you break it down. You see how your friends said you break it down into sectors, right? There's certain facets that need to be done. You can do the title stuff, which is kind of complicated but easy. You know, you identify who owns the property so that they can acquire the property. Their appraisal needs to be done so that they can give them just compensation for their property because they may have to take it so we can do the project. So there's so many things that have to go into that, but it's broken down. It's like piecemeal. you do this, you do that. It's not complicated, but
No,
overall,
it's
you have
complicated, Esther. You've been doing it for a long time. You're trying to make it sound easy, but it's way more complicated. Let me pull on that eminent domain thing because I think that's one subject that a lot of people hear about when it comes to cities that are overgrowing the population base, where all of a sudden, like, I mean, I'm located in Charleston, South Carolina. It was not meant to have this many people here, and they're trying to find where to put people to live. They're getting further and further north away from the city, but still those communities have to get built up because those communities weren't built to have so many people. And the one thing that you hear come up constantly is eminent domain, because there are parcels of land that maybe have been used or unused or maybe not used to its fullest capacity that need to be stripped away from people so they can build roads, more houses, what have you. So just break it down for me, because as you can tell, I'm not very bright. How does eminent domain work? Like, how do they decide what properties they do this with, and then what happens to the people who are already there?
okay, so pretty much if they okay, so the first order first. So whenever they identify an area there's an influx of people coming in, okay, they need more housing. So the transportation department doesn't determine that. So they'll get all their information and say, okay, well, we're gonna build a roadway this way to get these people from this part of the city quicker to the city where the jobs are, right? This is a hypothetical. So what do we do? Okay, the engineer will come in and say, okay, this is what we need to do. They'll do the plan, say, here's your right of way plan, what we need to actually acquire so that we can put the roadway in here. And at that point, it'll come down to say, all right, who owns these properties along Road 476, hypothetically speaking? All right, so we'll determine who owns these properties. There's 37 parcels. Who owns these? These people own these properties. This is when they brought it. Here's everything that's encumbering the property. Then that goes to the appraiser. They say, okay, let me appraise this property to determine how much it's worth. Hey, then my right of way agents go out and say, hey, the transportation authority, we need this property. We're going to offer you, let's say the house is worth $180,000. We're going to offer you $180,000 for this property. And then we'll give you a stipend so that you can move into another property if we have to take it. We may not have to take it all. We may only have to take a strip. We may only need a temporary construction easement. There's certain facets that they may not need their entire property. In the event that they do, I said, we'll buy this home and put you in another property of equivalent value for that property.
And legally they have to take that money, or because that's where you get into that sticky wicket, right? Where the government can say, yeah, you have to move. So let's talk about that sort of like fractured balance.
Okay, it's better to do it, right? It's better to do it. But if not, and say, hey, we're going to take you to condemnation. We're going to take you to court, and then we're going to take it, and we'll put the money into the court system, and then they can allocate it how they want to. But you can fight. Hey, you can fight. We had a project where the get-go was fighting with the transportation authority because they didn't want to give them that particular land because they're saying, okay, our trucks won't be able to get in there. They fought them, went to court. They're still in litigation actually right now because they were getting a huge amount of money. They're like, no, we don't want to do that because now you're infringing on our business. You're infringing on our business, and we can't get that traffic coming in because you're taking this part of our property. So it gets kind of sticky, but more often than not, they should act. I would say just do it. Who wants to go through court? Just find a new house and just move.
But it's easier for you to say, Esther. I mean, not if you've lived in a house for like your entire life and many multiple generations, and I get it. I mean, it's one of the funny things when you see growth in cities like this is it's one of those. It's almost like you set your clock for it. You can see on the nightly news there's going to be a story about this poor old person who's been living in his house for multiple generations. All of a sudden they're asked to move, and there's pushback. So you're saying legally because of eminent domain, they have to move. Like there's no way they could win that in court.
I want to say there's no way, but it's for public any property for public and private use, they can take your land. That's just how that's how they did it. Like, okay, we're gonna take your land because it's for public and private use. So we're gonna give you just compensation for your property. It's even exchange. This is how they're thinking. I'm not saying it's right, but this is how they're thinking. We're gonna give you just compensation. And by the way, we're gonna help you move to make them whole, I guess. But a lot of people based on their morals and how they feel, they can fight it. It's a long process, it's lengthy, and it's costly. So I don't know if the people want to
Yeah,
have to
it's
pay
out
for
of
all.
curiosity. Last thing on this, because we don't make it all about this. Is there ever a point where someone gets approached for eminent domain where they're like the offer they want more? Like, is that negotiable? Is that number negotiable?
Yes, they
Okay,
negotiate. Yeah. They'll
so
go
it's like
back
if
and
you take
forth.
a 180 and then person's like, well, yeah, no, I'm not gonna. I wouldn't even leave here for two. Then you get there would be some back and forth and probably get to a number that both parties are happy with.
Yes.
Wow.
It has to be reasonable compensation.
Of course,
Not
someone can't be like, it's worth 180. I'll take $1 million for it. I get it. I get it. How did you find yourself in this world, Esther? I joked that you probably could have done something a lot easier than this, but you say it's easy for you. But how did you find your way into this world? And obviously now you're trying to help the next generation with the book and all the work you're doing. But how did you end up here?
when I was in college, I went to the University of Pittsburgh. I'm actually working with them to get a scholarship, for a scholarship, Esther Franklin scholarship, so that people coming into the industry that will provide resources for them to come into. So that's my passion. So what I did, I went to the University of Pittsburgh. I was a intern at the district attorney's office. I wanted to be an attorney. Oh, I want to be an attorney. And then I worked in the criminal division. I hated it. Didn't want to do it. But I ultimately ended up getting into real estate. So I was in the real estate sector. I did title work. So I'm a title agent. I'm licensed in 22 states. And I liked it. I was like, well, how can I balance the legal side with the real estate side? And so I started working for different attorneys in the real estate sector. And I went off and opened up my own title company. That was 2014. And I got a phone call one day by Fred O'Brien. I'll never his daughter actually who still works for me. And he wanted to get out of the industry and he wanted me to buy his company. And I'm just like, well, I was kind of taken aback, like whatever. But he and I had spoken and he wanted me to join his team for a project working for the Turnpike Commission. And that's when I learned about it. I was like, oh God, I didn't even know this was a part of the real estate process. So he was teaching me how to do that while I was in the process of buying his company. I didn't buy his company, but I started Allrose, and we're still here today. And his daughter actually still works for me.
Wow, that's great. It's I sometimes and it's hard for me not to ask this question, but the sliding doors one, like, what would happen if Fred O'Brien never, came your way? Like, do you think about that? Like, do you think you could have gone in a completely different track? It seems like you were playing in that space already, but
Right,
if
right.
that phone call didn't happen, do you think you would end up here writing a book and helping the next generation of people and infrastructure?
I never thought about that. And I always say it all started with a Google search because I said, how did you find me? I asked Fred that. He's like, I Googled it. And I was just like, thank you, Google. That's how I always give homage to Google. Like, okay, all right. So he found me that. I never thought about it that way. And I just think that everything happens by divine right. It was just like, that was meant to happen. And then I met my partner, who's Alan, and he's been in the sector for like 25 years. And he said he doesn't have a college degree, but he's really good at what he does. And I was just learning, and I was like, how did I not know that this it was here? But then after doing some research, most of the work was in the law departments, the legal departments do that. But this is a separate sector that doesn't require that. So here we are. I'm so
Well,
excited.
congratulations. What a great start. And in the book, you write about the fact that diversity is an issue, like many industries, but it's so I'm just out of curiosity, thinking back to 2014 when you get in there, in terms of demographics, like were there a lot of minorities involved? Very little. Were you? I always joke with women when it's like especially their female leaders. It's like if there's a group of 10 people, there's 9 men, 1 woman. That kind of thing. Tell me about what it was like. Now going on almost like over 10 years. What was their diversity?
Actually, well, Erica was in there, but she worked for Fred. But she was on the back end. But in terms of leadership, no, not really none. And I'm just like, well, where's everyone? And then as a minority woman, I'm just like, I'm the only person, like literally, like it's just like it's not a lot of diversity in that industry, transportation anyway. So it's just like if we go to these events like OSHA or ASHI, and it's just like you're the eye, the black part of your eye. Like it's like oh there. It was just like, okay, you're the center of the eye. It is everything else. So that's how I felt. But there's more women now getting into the industry, but it's not a lot. Um, I don't think like I went to development part. I think there was 3 women, all men, all men. So it's like really like, come on in, it's there. I mean, let's just collaborate. And then if you can do the job, just get the job done. It's not about gender roles, but in the past it has been. They need to be more open because we bring the thunder. Women bring the thunder. You know that. So it's just like, come on, let's do it.
So can we look at a bright side? Has it gotten better since you first started? I know you mentioned you went to this event. There was only 3, but like, are you seeing more and more women, people of color, involved in the industry than you when you first started?
Yeah. No, no, not really. No.
Wow.
Well, maybe you said not many. So not many means more than one. No, not really.
Yes, yes.
No, not really. So it's just like but I did, and when I went to Atlanta, I did meet a girl. I went to one of their events. I did meet a girl. There's like 3 of them. There's 3 Black women appraisers. So in the appraiser sector, I see a lot more minorities getting into that appraiser sector. I even went to LinkedIn to find different people. Um, just not by color, but different people in different industries and different regions to say, okay, let me see how does it look in other areas other than Pittsburgh. But Pennsylvania is really not a lot. Atlanta, a little bit more upward on the upward bound. West Virginia, 0. Because that's one of the areas we cover is 0, 0, 0. Ohio, so it's really not. So it needs to be diversified. I don't know if it's that people don't know about this sector, or if it's just like, I call people bandwagon. Like, it's like bandwagon. I use a different word though, but um, and it's just like everyone goes with the status quo. Like, you don't go outside to figure out there's other career sectors, there's other areas to do, but they don't know. So here we are. The book is going to bring awareness to this sector so that people can get it. It's interesting. It's fun if you like to pay attention to detail. If you like the travel, it's good. It's good.
That's awesome. And what do you hope? Like, obviously, the takeaway is to inform people of the industry and what it's all about. And obviously, you wouldn't even have known anything about it if you didn't come up in Mr. O'Brien's Google search.
Right.
So I mean, that was sort of like you said, God's divine intervention. Like, it just happened. But for most people, that have that. So this book hopefully will play a role in that. So for folks who are probably just like learning about this industry, just like I am, what do you hope some of the main takeaways in terms of like how the industry works? Because you've painted a picture that for some people, Esther could be off-putting. I'm like, I don't want to be the only white woman in the space. I don't want to be the only person of color in this space. What does your book share that would inspire people to disregard all of that and be able to find an amazing career in this world?
I would say the main takeaway is block everything out. It's individuation, right? Focus on the career. If you like a challenge, if you like to learn new things, if you're looking for a career change in an area where you can thrive for the long term, and not only that, build a legacy for the people that come up under you, you could actually show other people, different, not just Black people, but all different races and gender. Hey, this sector is here. We need people. You can do a good job, and then it'll be the long term. There's a succession plan in that because there's not a lot of people in this area, but we're always going to have the land. We're always going to be up doing the roads because the asphalt, the salt, it eats up at the roads. People are always going to, more and more people are coming into the world. We're going to need different, more roads, more roadways, more bridges, all the wear and tear. So there's always going to be a job there. And to know, like, hey, don't worry about color, but there is barriers to entry prior, but now it's getting better because these transportation industries are becoming aware of the barriers to entry, that they have to lower the playing field so that the human capital can come in so that the job can get done.
All right. So mission 1 for people, read the book.
Read
But
the book.
once they've read Bridging the Gap, what happens next? Like, they're like, they've finished reading and Esther, I've learned so much about this industry, inspiring story. What's the first steps they would take to enter this industry?
So in the book, there's a QR code. We're offering courses in these different industries. There's a resource there also. Well, say, hey, we created a website to say, hey, if you want to get in this industry, this is what you need to do. Here's the steps. We're creating a mentor program too under these different career sectors to say, hey, okay, you want a mentor, reach out to this person, or we'll give them resources to actually get into the industry and give them direction on where they need to go if that's what their career choice is.
Awesome. That's great. No, it's wonderful because I think that's the one thing to me. I'm like, okay, great. I've read the book now
Right.
because
Yeah.
like you said, it sounds very arcane and it sounds like you have to know somebody. But the fact that you're providing these resources is incredibly helpful. And you hinted at a legacy earlier, and I wrap up these conversations, Esther, by taking folks behind the dedication of the book. And interesting enough, like I'll read this part of the dedication, but you're the only person I've ever seen write this in a book so far. But you say, when I pursued the education I need to build business, support my family, and create a legacy for my children's future, Milton Hershey School delivered a quality education to all my children. Very rarely in this world, Esther, as you know, the education system gets pooped on, for lack of a better word, more often than not. Why was it important to include the Milton Hershey School in the dedication to your book?
Milton Hershey is a private school in Pennsylvania, and they provide private. Well, I don't know if you know the story. So Milton Hershey chocolates, the chocolate factory, Hershey, all those. So they couldn't have children. So they opened up a school, provided for free for people in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania. And they provided a quality education because when I was like, I got to go to school, but I didn't want to send my kids to different places. Like, I got to pay for daycare. That's going to be a lot. I got to pay for college. So I had to balance. And I was just like, I have to make a sacrifice. And I actually got them in. And I think my kids are very intelligent. And my daughter, she's going to Duquesne University for architectural engineering. But they provided that education that I couldn't do on my own while I was still pursuing my own educational career. So to them, I feel homage.
Wow, that's so great. That's so sweet. And I think it's important because I think for a lot of people, especially me who don't have kids, realize that when the pandemic happened, most people don't realize a big part of school is it's essentially a big old daycare for kids from grade K through 12. Like like parents need to send their children somewhere safe, but also send them the hell out. Like they got to go out of the house and learn. And so it's a great way. It's great that you've acknowledged them because I think a lot of parents, I think, sometimes may take the education system for granted, like during the pandemic, like, oh my God, now what am I gonna do with my kids? Oh, I got to homeschool too. So it's very difficult, and I get it. So the fact that this school was around to help educate your children while you were educating yourself and building a company is incredibly inspiring and so thoughtful for you to do that. That's really cool. Thank you very much for sharing that. And for folks who want to find out more about you, Esther, as we wrap things up, where can they obviously buy the book, which is Bridging the Gap, Breaking Barriers, and Building Pathways to Transportation Careers. But if they want to find out more information about you and what you're doing, where should they start?
Well, they can go to my website. Is www.estherfranklin.com. It's just a whole slew of what I do. I wrote a couple books, but it's a different sector. And also in there, it'll give you a link to the courses. It's called highwayinfrastructurecourses.com, where you can find a whole array of courses that we offer in this industry as well.
Awesome. Esther, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Esther and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.